formulated, taking out Farouk's words about the operational image, where he phrased that an operational image is the image, not the image that is taken of an objectified reality, of an object, but it's the image that is done by a machine for a machine. And that is actually what Jennifer was trying to formulate at some points, and also Andreas, about that an image is not an image of a profile of a person or an image of an objectified reality, but is actually, and how I think about an image, bringing out this term of image infinite, is the data gathered around our profile on the network discourse. So how this kind of typology is important and dominant, and how we can alter this governed idea of our images and our data being on the net. And what is your, how would you phrase your interpretation of an image infinite in relation to the network discourse?
Yeah, I guess we all come with our references and knowledge when it comes to what you're very interestingly discussing. For me, I have to say that when I kind of read the term infinite image, and when I think about images, it very has to do with, in my head at least, with the image that it's being captured by an apparatus, by a device. I think maybe, I mean, we talked about it a little bit before about that we both find interesting how Flusser refers to images, and how we, let's say, have the traditional images, which is how we see the world with our own eyes, and then we have the technical images that are kind of being captured by the camera, and then nowadays we even have the artificial images that we can even also talk about. But like also referring to what you said about Farouk now, the operational image, I think we are living in an era that an image, a technical image, basically kind of captures and carries so much data with it, because it's not about like taking an image, but it's also about the location that might be associated to it. It's about the time that might be associated with it. It's about the face recognition systems that can be used for it. So it kind of carries so much information along, which is one thing to take in mind. The second thing to take in mind is that we are all tend to make such images and share such images. What was discussed at some point in the film about who are the producers and who are the administrators, who are the receivers, it's like we've entered an era for a long time now that we kind of are all sharing these roles, but the role that we're not really sharing, or we might be thinking that we're sharing, is like the role of the administrator and the one who really has control of these images. And nowadays it's basically always kind of the platforms, basically it's always the market. So you might be thinking that you have control of your image, and here we can play with the word, and it might be a JPEG, but it might also be your profile. And in both cases you're kind of losing this control all the time. You can never really have the whole, let's say, control of the data that is being circulated. And the other thing that I wanted to bring in a little bit was that we very much anyway are entering an era that also now networks produce images, like artificial neural networks are kind of generating images, the so-called deep fakes that are a kind of a classic example. So these are kind of exposes us to a reality when we don't know anymore when an image is real and when it is not. Yeah, and regarding maybe what you said at the end, the infinite image, well, for me, the first time that I read it was like, I said to myself, yeah, of course the image is infinite, because the image on the internet continuously tends to circulate, and you, exactly as I said before, you don't really have control over it. And this might be a meme that's kind of shared and is modified from person to person, but also it can be any kind of information that is shared like that online, which brings us to another topic that, if we want, we can discuss about the right of the image or of the data to be deleted, the right of your data to be kind of forgotten. And we have gone a long way now, and things are a little bit better, but still, if you don't ask for your data to be removed from social networks, this will not happen. So, yeah, that would be maybe my interpretation. And maybe as we are now, I found it interesting that also in the film they were kind of discussing how we are in an era that especially the young generation is kind of sharing images all the time. And maybe going back a little bit to the thought of Flusser, who was saying very beautifully that the images help us navigate in the world. I was wondering how do you feel about that coming in as an artist, when you kind of maybe bring to your mind the thought of somebody like Flusser and thinking about the reality that we're living in today, and the situation with the role of the images and the role of the gaze in today's kind of algorithmic reality.
Yes. Well, that was kind of starting from the former answer, like why did I decide to slowly change form and kind of decide for some kind of like material death of my own persona in the work, and slowly turn to some kind of immaterial entity of an algorithm, and that is what I'm slowly in an attempt to kind of do since a year now or more, which is very interesting in relation to both the commodity of art, both the object of art, or the critical discourse that a navigator or a director or a mediator of information, of thought, that I consider that could be a possibility of another alternative of the artist body. In the practice of what I call as the practice of theory, or in some terms I am also trying to do, but also starting to create a kind of system that how would it be to create, to make an algorithm that we can actually regain control of our data. So how would it be to develop a sort of possible scheme where using the whole system, like how our surveilled network and our surveilled reality works in physical terms, to develop a work that the navigator is basically the surveillance, so alternate the different roles. So alternate the role of the actors to the role of the cameras, alternate the role of the assistant of the director to the role of the surveillance camera. The humans are basically nowadays in a kind of secondary role, so use the humans as agents in a kind of scheme, and introduce the idea that we, how would it be like comparing the network discourse and the internet with a wide cube gallery space, that there is no particular artworks, object artworks, but the artwork itself is the discourse about how do we actually navigate out of the governance in this surveillance. So the navigator, for me, it would be both the role of the surveillance camera, hacking the surveillance camera, or introducing another role for the surveillance camera, developing a navigator with the tools of the own scheme of what is the governance and such, and of course then the role of the artist kind of starts to slowly negotiate with other terms in relation to what the art discourse could actually illuminate. So I think I'm just trying to find out myself